Welcome to the Warfare Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Lane Lawson Craft. Join us here every other Monday. Now, let's get into today's podcast. Welcome to the Warfare Parenting Podcast. I know today is going to be a day that you walk away and know more than you ever knew about self-harm. The numbers are staggering. But more important, I have a wonderful guest that's going to be with us all 3 episodes. Hello, Dena. How are you? Dena Yohe is here with us.
Glad to be here.
Dena, you yourself have experienced this 10 years ago or more. You went through a journey with your daughter.
Yes.
Many things happened that you couldn't dream or imagine, but one was self-harm and cutting. Mm-hmm. And you were my go-to. The reason I love what you do, Dena, is I say you're in the trenches. You help parents literally worldwide. It's Hope for Hurting Parents. That's Dena and her husband and her family have this, and they help parents that are hurting. And today, if you are a parent or a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, anyone that has a teen or young adult that you feel is self-harming, we pray that this episode and the 3 that are in this topic will touch you. So, Dena, I'm just going to start right here. I'm going to define self-harm, and I have it as it can be injuring or hurting yourself on purpose, also known as self-injury. Self-harm is a symptom of extreme emotional distress. Mm-hmm. Teens engage in different types of self-harm that can be hard to recognize or identify. Mm-hmm. Self-harm is truly what they're saying, personal injury, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And to go a little deeper on that definition, when the pain is so deep that they literally cannot express it, they can't verbalize it. They're either too afraid or they don't have the capacity. That's when they're driven to hurt themselves.
Yes. And, one of the things I'm looking at, it says that it's becoming more common. Mm-hmm. This is what's sad. There is, it says a recent analysis of data from the Centers for Disease Control reveals that up to 30% of teenage girls and 10% of boys say they have intentionally injured themselves. Mm-hmm. One study found that as many as 25% of young people engage in self-harm. That's 1 in 4.
And it affects adults as well.
Wow. So you're saying self-harm is also in adults too?
Yes. I've met them and I've heard their stories firsthand, and it is surprising. You think it's something that's more common among teens and preteens, but adults also struggle with this.
Well, we have defined warfare parenting for teens and young adults, and I say up to 35 years old, because so many times in the situations they are in, their maturity level is oppressed because of maybe an addiction or an emotional problem. And so it kind of stifles the growth. And sometimes they may be 25 and 27, but actually have the mentality or experience as an 18-year-old. So I've really expanded that. Do you find that to be true too, Dena?
Oh, definitely. Especially where any kind of substance use was involved. But sometimes it's just simply a matter of some trauma in the past that the individual has not processed or worked through. And you can bury it and stuff it and repress it, but eventually it comes out. And sometimes this is the way that it comes out. And even a young woman that I met in her 30s, involved in full-time Christian ministry, married happily, was struggling with this, and she tried to keep it a secret from her husband. And once she couldn't hide it any longer, and began to seek counseling, even when she wanted help, it still took 6 years to finally overcome and not have the need to do that anymore. So it's a deep issue for many people, not for everyone, but it can be, and it can take time to recover from.
Yes, and we will get to that. It says right here that there's been a steep rise over the last 10 years. And again, especially for girls, Dina. It says that self injury increased by 166% in girls aged 10 to 14 and in 62% in girls aged 15 to 19. The majority of these increases involve the most common form of self harm, cutting. Since 2009, the rate of cutting by younger girls has increased by 18.8% each year.
And I'm sure the pandemic caused those numbers to go even higher.
Yes, and these are pre-COVID numbers. And so that, can you imagine? It was saying a quarter raise every year in the last 10 years. Can you imagine what the last 2 years since COVID? I can't even fathom. So for anyone listening, again, this is all about self-harm. We are going to feature cutting too. It says, why do teenagers, Dena, and young adults, why do they do this to themselves? And it says they are going through just feelings. It says right here, just feelings of pain, tension, anxiety. They have painful emotions that are anger, shame. And you talked about there may be a trauma or something, some kind of root, right?
Yes. And to us, trauma sounds like, oh, it's a big event, something really terrible, but it can be, in our eyes, something that's not really big to us. Maybe a teacher said something that really hurt their feelings. Maybe a classmate has been bullying them and making fun of them. So it can be something that we don't think was significant, but it was to them. Yes, the reasons are so varied, and it's very complicated. When we were trying to learn about this, the list was so long of the possible reasons. We're just like, oh my goodness, this is very difficult to understand.
It is. And that took me right into our next part. And that's about social media, which is also very relatively new. They say that a lot of times that the social media, it says, normally they do this in private, but with social media like this TikTok and all these things that dare these teens and young adults to hurt themselves. And they also, do it together in these situations. So social media has really put fire, or what we would say fuel to the fire, in self-harm. Do you see that too, Dena?
Well, we didn't have to deal with that with our daughter, but we do hear stories about that. Yes, girls might take a picture of how they hurt themselves and send it to a friend. Excuse me, maybe just because they think it's cool. It can be a trend. Oh, you want to be cool? Okay, so I hurt myself and send a picture. So yes, social media has certainly made it worse.
Well, and I say often, Dena, another portion of the social media is that everybody looks so happy and perfect and skinny. And I say all the time, I rarely leave social media feeling better about myself. And I'm old. I'm 58 years old. I'm saying it still intimidates me. It still makes me feel like I'm not good enough sometimes. I mean, I'm just saying, can you imagine being a teen and young adult today and everybody shows their best day?
And then there's cyberbullying that we can't even begin to grasp, not having experienced that ourselves. Yes, there's so many opportunities for young people to be upset and feel even more anxious than they would without all of that, right?
Well, and this research, let me tell you, this is a study. It shows that depressive symptoms and suicide rates among adolescents increased between 2010 and 2015, especially among females again. But it's because teenagers who spent more time on social media and smartphones were more likely to report mental health issues. The less time they spend on these things, the less health issues they have. So there's a direct correlation, again, between social media, the iPhones, the computer, all of that. That is not helping our teens and young adults.
You're right. Fortunately, when this was going on with our daughter, this was pre all of this. It was like over 20 years ago. So I'm very grateful we didn't have that too. It was just starting. So that didn't affect us. But yes, I'm well aware that that is a huge factor.
It is. It is. I just want to just it right here. It's you understanding self injury, self harm. It says may bring a temporary feeling of calm and a release of tension. However, the painful emotions quickly return. Some teens self injury only a few times and then stop, but others continue repeatedly over a long period of time. And therefore, self harming can turn into a compulsive behavior. And did y'all see that too, Dina, and the people that you treat and in your personal experience, that maybe it started out as something done a few times, but then turned into a lifestyle?
Yes, that's definitely our story, and something that can happen, that it can become an addiction, depending on the reason the person's doing it. And that's exactly what happened with our daughter. It starts out as just light scratching and progresses to severe injury requiring stitches. And self injury takes many other forms, burning, breaking bones. Is eating disorders are another way that people hurt themselves. Um, so we definitely saw the progression over the years with our daughter. And if substance use and alcohol are involved, then it can become life threatening.
Yes. And I want to go over this. I've got the next thing. We are just doing great because what are the types? People may be asking, is what are some types that I could be looking for? Listen, you've got picking scabs, pulling hair. A lot of teens, young adults pull hair, burning or grazing yourself, biting, bruising, hitting a part of your body with something very hard, uh, unbelievable branding. So these are other forms of self harm, and I'm not real familiar with this, Dina. You may or may not be, but digital self harm or self cyberbullying is when teenagers create alternative online identities for themselves on social media sites and post cruel comments about themselves.
That's
Yeah,
new to
oh,
me.
yeah,
Huh,
yes,
awful.
and
Wow.
yeah, it's just crazy. But the thing that I want to say here, it says that again, the numbers are they're getting higher, Dina. I want anyone that's listening today or in the future to our voices is that you're not alone. I mean, this is something that a lot of teens and young adults, unfortunately, are in have an experience with.
Yes. And what's so hard for parents is that because it's so secretive, um, parents are always the last to know. Um, the kids do these to themselves in places where they don't want anyone to see. They don't want anyone to know because, again, they can't talk about this. They're too afraid. So they will injure in places that you're not going to see. Or, well, one of the ways that something's going on is if they're wearing long sleeves, a jacket, and it's hot. There's no need for a jacket today, but they do it in places where we wouldn't ever think to look or ask to look, um, because this is so personal.
Well, I want to go into another part of the why. Why do they do this? And it says parents and pediatricians often wonder why would they do this? Why would they cut themselves? Why would they burn themselves? But it is a complex, as you stated earlier, behavioral problem. It is often associated with a variety of psychiatric disorders, depression, anxiety, eating disorders. Teens who cut themselves are more likely to have friends who cut themselves, Dina. Low self esteem, a history of abuse, or thoughts of committing suicide. Would you agree to all of that?
Oh, definitely. It's a tragedy. Um, what frightened us the most was when the therapist told us that there was a possibility of some kind of sexual abuse. Something might have happened that we never knew about that could be behind all of it. And we thought, oh my, that's not possible. How could that be? Eventually, we did learn that that was the case. And Renee wrote about that in some of her journal entries she gives us permission to talk about these things. They're not a secret anymore. I always like people to know that. But yes, it's again, it's a tragedy, And these young people really need help, and they're crying out for help. They don't know how to do that. As a matter of fact, our daughter said, the way you know if this is truly a serious problem is if they are trying to keep it hidden. But if they let you see, they pull up this, they happen to walk in there, they let you see the wounds, that is their way of saying, help me.
Right.
They might not be able to verbally say it, but if they let you see it, that's their way of asking for help.
Well, that walks us into some signs.
Mm.
Right now, if you are wondering if your teen or young adult might be self harming in any way, there are some ways we can look at that they have listed. Behavior signs are they've got changes in their sleeping or eating patterns. They lose interest in activities that they used to enjoy. They avoid activities like swimming, where their legs and arms or parts of their torso can be seen. If they wear clothes, like you were saying, long sleeves, cover everything up, skip school, or their performance at school declines, hide objects like blades and knives and lighters and matches. And there's some emotional signs, Dena. They have big changes in moods. They're irritable. They have an ongoing temper tantrum, right? They feel sad, empty, or hopeless. They feel worthless or very guilty. And then there's some physical signs. They have injuries that they can't explain, be agitated, seem very slow or tired with very little energy. And I just want to tell everyone this: cutting is most common in teens, especially again, teen girls around the ages of 12 to 14. So, in these signs, and as we're reading them, Dena, in emotional, did you see that in your daughter?
I definitely did. Um, she would have just carry a lot of angst with her, um, mood swings. Um, she also says that if your child spends a lot of time alone, especially in their bedroom, that's a warning sign something might be wrong. You find bloodstained tissues. They may have some, excuses, kind of lame excuses. Um, or even listening to a different kind of music than they used to, angry music, sad music. But we definitely did see this. And what we learned later on this journey was that our daughter was suffering with something called a sensory processing disorder or a sensory integration disorder that causes the individual to be overly sensitive to external stimulus. And for her, it was all external stimulus, which creates this overriding anxiety and angst and a need for relief because it's difficult to be calm. Everything makes you anxious and uptight. And she just thought it was normal that everybody felt that way and that she had to figure out how to cope. And this was one of the things that she did.
Well, on the physical side, did she wear long clothing? Do you remember? Did she not go swimming? How did she cover it up?
Well, we were living in Florida. And as this became more of a problem, yes, she was a soccer player on her team at school, in middle school. And in that hot weather, she'd be out there in a sweatshirt or a long sleeve t-shirt. And you'd be wondering, why are you wearing long sleeve shirt? Well, she was trying to hide the cuts. She only cut on her arms, sometimes on her ankles. In the winter, in a different climate where we were living years later, it would be certain shoes and boots that she would keep on in addition to the sweatshirts. So she took a lot of precautions to be sure we didn't see and didn't know. Once we did know, then that was a whole different story. A lot more stress of overreacting on our part to try and keep her safe, hoping that we could prevent it from happening. But that's pretty difficult.
Yes, and I still want to go back to the beginning, and you said from experience and just from knowledge, it is a complex issue. It's not just a simple, like you scratch your knee and put a band-aid and it heals. This is something a lot more, right, Dena?
It can take a long time, even with the help of a therapist, to get to what the root issue is. And it just takes a lot of perseverance and not giving up to get there. Our daughter eventually did, but it took a long time.
Well, this is so powerful, Dena, and I'm so thankful you're here for this whole 3 episode series on self harm and cutting specifically. And, the next episode, we're going to have you back and you're going to share part of your testimony. So thank you again for today.
Thank you.